Hi guys, welcome back. So I don't know if you follow Books and Lala, but she did this really interesting video where she talked about her stats from different years on BookTube. But I saw that video and the nerd in me just got super excited and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go out and make a spreadsheet about my reading for 2017 because this is so cool and I want to do this. So yeah, I totally geeked out and went out and made a spreadsheet about all of the books that I read in 2017, and I thought it was really interesting, some of the results that I came up with. Obviously, I don't have multiple years to talk about, but I did think it was pretty interesting, some of the stuff that I found out. So I thought I would go ahead and make this video and just share some of that with you guys, because I can't be the only one who geeks out about stuff like this. Okay, in the year of 2017, I read 65 books, which I'm very happy with. And that was 22,834 pages for an average page length of 351 pages, which is not bad. The shortest book that I read was a graphic novel, Lumberjane's Gotham Academy 1, and the longest book that I read this year was Illuminae. My average rating of books for this year was 4.0, which is pretty good. I think is actually lower than my average for last year. I probably tend to rate books on the slightly higher end of the spectrum, though I have gotten a little bit more picky since doing BookTube, I feel like. Okay, so let's look at the number of books I read every month. I thought this was pretty interesting. So January and February, I didn't read at all. I had a newborn. My youngest was born on December 20th of 2016, so I didn't read any books January and February. I read one book in March, and that was actually a parenting book, so probably because we were dealing with the newborn and the toddler. And then I read one book in April, 3 books in May, and then it's interesting because you can see in June I started my BookTube channel, and my number of books jumped up to 6. And then you can kind of see it goes, I'll try to like show you guys if I can figure out a way to do it. So it goes from 6 in June, 7 in July, 9 in August, back down to 6 in September. I think because I was doing that September for Syria thing, and so I was reading some more long and serious books, so that took me a little bit longer to get through. October was crazy. I read 15 books, which is like unheard of. 7 in November, and then 10 in December. So I just thought it was kind of interesting the way that I broke it up. The next thing I did is I looked at my genres, and it is very clear that my favorite genre is sci-fi fantasy. 48% of the books that I read this year were in the sci-fi fantasy category, and that could be adult or young adult. I didn't break it up in this. My next biggest category was contemporary, where I read 8, and that could be a mix of different types of contemporary novels. And then after that, nonfiction was 5, paranormal was 5, and graphic novels were also 5. And then there was just kind of like a mix of other random things, like a couple of literary fiction, a couple of historical fiction, etc. But the biggest chunk of this was definitely sci-fi fantasy. It's also interesting because if you look at my star ratings, 70% of my 5-star ratings went to sci-fi fantasy. So clearly it's a favorite. I didn't have any 1-star ratings this year. I don't really give a lot of 1-star ratings. I mean, I have to really, really hate a book to give it 1 star. So there wasn't anything I felt that strongly about that I read this year. I think partly because if I hate a book that much, I'll usually DNF it. So yeah, no 1 stars for me. I had 3 2-star ratings, 16 3-star ratings, 26 4-star ratings, and 20 5-star ratings. So that's what I ended up with out of the 65. So I also looked at some other stats like diversity, and the way that I coded diversity was the author and or main character were from an underrepresented population. So that could be a racial minority group, that could be somebody from the LGBTQ community, etc. And I was actually pleasantly surprised with how diversely I'd been reading. 51% of my books were diverse books, which is pretty awesome, actually. Then I did a subcategory of how many of those diverse books were own voices books, and that dropped down to 35%, but I still feel like that's pretty good, so I am really happy to see that. Then I looked at the spread across the age groups that I was reading. I read 6% in middle grade, 20% in adults, and maybe unsurprisingly, 74% young adult this year. So not surprising. I do read a lot of YA. However, I think for next year, I would like to see those numbers shift a little bit. I think I would like to have a little bit less in the YA category and a little bit more in the adult category. The final couple things that I looked at were how many arcs I read and how many new releases I was reading. So 57% of the books that I read were released in 2017, and that's also not including the fact that I read a few 2018 arcs as well. Not very many, but a handful of them. So I was reading predominantly things released in 2017. And I also read a good number of arcs. 23% of the books that I read were arcs, and most of those were physical copies. There were a couple e-arcs that I was sent by authors, but most of them were physical books that I picked up at BookCon or at New York City Comic Con or at other Bookish events, or things that I won in giveaways or got from authors. So yeah, anyway, I don't know. I just thought this was really interesting. I kind of geeked out about it and had so much fun putting my little spreadsheet together. So I'll try to find a way to show some of this to you guys on the screen. I thought it was interesting. Hopefully some of you think it's interesting too. I am definitely planning on doing this for next year as well. I'm going to track kind of what I'm reading and when I'm reading it, and I kind of want to compare and see how it looks for next year because I'm really curious to see. I've never before looked in so much detail at my reading, and it's kind of eye-opening. So I'm hoping that this will also make me more aware of what I'm choosing to read, and hopefully bring a little bit more balance and diversity to some of the areas that need it. But I am pretty pleased with a lot of it. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought about this, if you do this sort of thing, if you have any thoughts on these stats, if I'm the only one who is geeky enough to do this, but I thought it was really fun and super interesting. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to see more. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys next time.